Hey, Robin.
Hello, Alex. Hello, everyone. We have got another great book from Alex's shelf this week. It is behind him. It is what many people refer to as the Georgian War and Peace. It is The Eighth Life.
It's huge.
Fulbruca is the full title. It's a fat one. It's a fatty. A doorstopper is not giving it enough credit. And I think, Alex, just a few reflections on how we're progressing through our shelves. We broached our first novel last week. We did Virginia Woolf, Mrs. Dalloway, and we established in that podcast two things, I think it's fair to say. Number one, Virginia Woolf is pretty much like the ideal novelist for Guardian readers.
Mm.
She's the absolute pinnacle. She got the most votes as an author. She had 3 books in there on the Guardian's 100 top list to read in all literatures are possible that you can read in English. And we established that. And I really love Mrs. Dalloway, Virginia Woolf. That's the kind of thing I like. And we also established it's just not up your alley at all.
Who, me?
I don't. You seemed your eyes just were not lighting up talking about a single day in the life. You want a century, years in
That's a
lives.
fair point. That's a fair point. I want a broad swath of history if I can.
And this book really delivers on that. Listeners, let's just dial you in on this. It might not be a book that you've heard of, and it's not a book that was familiar to me. And yet, of the books that we've done so far, it is the highest rated book on Goodreads
You're kidding.
with a solid 4.5 rating. This book is kicking the ass of Virginia Woolf, kicking the ass of William Shirer, kicking the ass of Alexander Solzhenitsyn. She's 4.5, incredibly high. People love this book. Published in English in 2020, written in 2014. What do we mean by the War and Peace of Georgia? Very simply, it is an intergenerational story. It begins with an aunt worrying about her niece going rogue in Amsterdam and going around Berlin. They're sort of Georgian expats, and she's worried about her niece. And then she realizes that her niece is really hunting down one of their family members' history in Germany. And she goes, wait, there's something you have to know. You have to know the history of our family. As Wendell Stevenson said in her review of this book, Tolstoy himself, when he wanted to write about the Decembrist Revolution in Russia, he was like, wait, I got to dial this back to get back to where this is. I got to dial this back 30 years to understand where this really began.
Nice parallel.
And he goes, wait, I can't even do that. I've got to go all the way back to the Napoleonic Wars with Russia. And apparently Nino Haratischvili.
Oh, with the first name, you nailed it. Haratischvili. Yeah.
Haratischvili.
Yeah.
She was born in Georgia herself, moved to Germany, and wanted to write about her childhood growing up in the chaotic 90s in Georgia, but decided that to do that, she had to go all the way back. So you get everything in this book. You get Georgia in its brief moment as a free republic, as a democracy. You get it as part of the Soviet Empire. You get it as part of the point of view of a Stalinist patriarch. You get it from the point of view of a rebel who escapes an exile, who escapes the Stalinist purges. They're all related to each other. And strung throughout this, there's a little magic realist touch, which is that there is a family recipe for chocolate. And this hot chocolate is so delicious that it addicts you. But the moment you start drinking it, bad things are going to come. And boy, do bad things happen in Georgia in the 20th century.
And I think, and that's, Robin, that's beautiful. By the way, listeners, readers, viewers, and I guess readers not so much, but viewers and listeners, this is a 1,000-page book that Robin has just summarized in a beautiful way. So just kudos for that. Taking one step back, the author, I'm not sure, Robin, if you had the same reaction I did when you learned that she was born in 1983. And this book was published in 2014 in the Georgian. So that means she was mighty young when she put this thing out to press. And so I reacted in the way that I typically do, which is with a little head shake, a tip of the hat to the author, but also a little bit of envy, frankly, for that level of accomplishment at such a young age. I mean, it took you few more decades. It took me a few more decades to be as accomplished as we are
No,
today.
I think that's it. There's most authors. I'm a little bit older than you, Alex. Doctors get younger, authors just get younger. The only people who don't get younger are popes. But it is a very precocious book for someone to write at that age. But also, I guess, the kind of like really ambitious book that you would really hope a young person does. It's a real
Right.
swing for the fences and just being like, you know what? I can do this. I
Right.
left
Yeah.
I left when I was 20 and I'm just going to go for the whole thing. It does sort of reek of that. Just let's not worry about my limitations. Why not? Why not just do it?
Yeah, and Georgia just is such an impressive place. Robin, you hit on a few of the highlights of the history over the late 19th and early 20th, and then into the 21st century. Just for a country of just a few million people, the language is so unique, so special. The font is beautiful. The
Listen,
history of
the only thing I really know about Georgia, and I learned a little bit researching this book, but the only thing I really know about Georgia is that font is gorgeous. I think it's the most beautiful writing system in the world.
it's awesome.
I could stare at it all day.
Yeah, and the country's beautiful. I haven't had the chance to tour around enough yet, but having gone to Tbilisi, it's got a ton of energy. The food is fantastic. The wine, obviously, it's really the birthplace of wine. That can be controversial saying this here in Western Europe, but it is where vino culture got started. So yeah, really special place. We can get back into that a little bit later,
Well, no,
Robin.
let's just do it because this is the War and Peace of Georgia. Why should we be interested in Georgia? It is a tiny country with this interesting place in the Caucasus, and it's a real in-between country. One of these places that has been run by the Arabs, run by the Russians, run by sort of everyone who's got a stake in it. What is its significance? Why has it lasted for so long? What does it mean for you?
Yeah, we could go on for the entire episode here. I mean, I think it's fiercely independent, fiercely proud. Georgians are extremely proud, and rightly so, of their culture and their history. Has been the target of sort of imperialism in many shapes and forms. In 19th century, the Caucasus were really the target of the Russian Empire. It was sort of the with parts of Central Asia, kind of the last and most difficult part of what then became the Soviet Union for the Russians to take over. The site of incredible, brutality, not always right in what is now Georgia, but in the general region. Yeah, as we were discussing before, birthplace of both Stalin and Beria, two notorious folks in the Soviet Union. And I think that always kind of gave Georgia a little bit of a tough reputation. I think it's something that Georgians have had to grapple with in the years since. I think, Stalin's hometown in Gori is, home to a little Stalin museum. I haven't had a chance to visit yet, but I think it's just very complex to figure out how to kind of understand and process the legacy of such a bad guy.
And Beria just as almost worse in many ways. It's crazy that the two nastiest people in the Stalinist world, Stalin himself and Beria, who was in charge of the secret police, I believe, the NKVD, and was the guy who had all the secret cells and was the disappearing people and was a serial rapist of the highest order. It's crazy that they both came from the same place. I assume spoke with the same accent. To the Russian ear, and to have that association with those voices must be wild. It would be like as if, two awful people in two dictators in England both came from Manchester or something like that.
And it is the way sort of clan politics works in a bureaucracy. It's not pure coincidence, and I don't think we want to
Okay.
attribute too much to kind of. There can be kind of an essentialism as well about the Caucasus that people from the Caucasus are constantly, and historians are trying to push back against. So I think the happenstance of Stalin ending up in the high position he then sort of had a clique of Georgians who were close to him as a consequence. But yeah, really really complicated legacy. And then in the post-Soviet context, one of the places that has been fiercely independent has continued to go through challenging political contexts, sort of suffered the prelude of the Ukraine invasion with the seizure of a huge chunk of territory in 2008, and Georgians had their views on Russia calcified when that happened, and so they sort of like how many Ukrainians say that in 2014, since 2014, they've been at war with Russia. Many Georgians say since 2008 they've been dealing with the same thing. So lots of twists and turns. A lot of Americans. I don't know how it was in the UK, Robin, but a lot of Americans sort of put Georgia on the map with Saakashvili, who was,
Yeah. I mean, when I was working at the Wall Street Journal, that's when that was like a big thing that messed up with my weekend, was the Saakashvili and the invasion of Georgia. That was like a crazy thing. And it's sort of literally one of those really ignorant moments where I was like, wait, where is Georgia? What's going on? Why is this happening?
Yeah, wild. And then, he was a close ally of George W. Bush before that, and I think with Tony Blair as sort of this like-minded politician. He was an excellent and effective politician, and formed allegiances with the West in a very effective way. Anyway, we digress. Super interesting place.
So that's the history of Georgia, and I think, just to bring it back to the book, one of the things this book is I think a small nationalist attempt to basically say this is what Georgia really is. So here's sort of a different point, which is that I don't know if you're aware of this, and I don't know if it's absolutely legit, but as the beginning, as this person is introducing a book, introducing Georgia to her relative, she tells this rather charming story that there was a time when God was trying to assign all the countries to all the different peoples, and everyone had shown up, and God was like, okay, Italy, you get this, and he's being really, really great. And then at the end of this, God has left a little bit that's just for himself, so he can have a little rest. And so he goes there, and of course he's given himself the best wine, and he finds a man sleeping under the tree, and he's like, wait, you've been sleeping this whole time? And the man goes, yeah, I guess I really didn't mean to. And God feels kind of bad for him. And he's like, well, look, this is really bad that you missed the whole distribution system. But I'll tell you what, why don't you just take this part of the world?
Nice.
My own little corner that is where I'm going to relax. You might as well have it. Your people deserve it too.
That's
so,
nice.
Yeah. And so just to read from then on, this is the narrator of the story who is trying to explain Georgia. And God, gracious as ever, impressed by the man's nonchalance and utter lack of ambition, gave him his very own holiday paradise, which is to say, Georgia, the country you, Brilka, and I, and most of the people I would tell of our story are from. What I'm trying to say is this: bear in mind that in our country, this nonchalance, that is laziness, and lack of ambition, lack of arguments, are considered truly noble characteristics. Bear in mind that also that a profound identification with God, the Orthodox God, of course, and no other, does not prevent the people of our country from believing in everything that has even the slightest hint of the mysterious legendary or fairy tale about it. And that is by no means restricted to the Bible, giants in the mountains, house spirits, the evil eye that can plunge a man into misfortune. The country, once golden Colchis, that had to surrender the secret of love to the Greeks in the shape of the golden fleece, because the king's wayward daughter Medea was so love-struck that she had lost her mind, commanded it. And then she just keeps on going on. The country in whose language there is no gender, which certainly does not equate to equal rights. And the country that, in the last century, after 135 years of Tsarist Russian patronage, managed to establish a democracy for precisely 4 years before it was toppled again by the mostly Russian but also Georgian Bolsheviks, and proclaimed it the Socialist Republic of Georgia and thus a constituent republic of the Soviet Union. And then she says, I think that our country can really be very funny, by which I mean not only tragic, that in our country forgetfulness too is very possible in combination with repression. So she's summing up all of Georgia there. What struck me is that it's not quite what you were saying in terms of Beria and Stalin. There seems like the Georgian self-image is of this magical, sunny, laid-back land.
Yeah. I don't think Georgians would let that get in the way of legitimate national pride. It's more of like a speed bump to be grappled with more than defining characteristic. Yeah.
And then fantastic carpets as well. They also make excellent carpets. Not known for it, but
everything from Georgia is fantastic.
Okay, so Alex, why did you get this book? This is a podcast about why we get the books we do and why we can't finish them. So let's start with the first question. What drew your attention to this
Yeah, I think
masterpiece?
I must have come across one of these reviews that was published around 2020, 2021 when the book was translated into English and gets glowing reviews. I think part of this is kind of the appeal of Georgia and the Caucasus in kind of the mystical, what are the regions that are kind of considered the mystical and undervisited regions of the former Soviet Union. And so, this is catnip for me. The topic is easily lures me in. And so this was actually on my list for a long time of books that I want to buy. And every Christmas, basically, my parents say, choose 3 or 4 books. This is dangerous for you and me, Robin. Choose 3 or 4 books that we can give you, but just you buy them for yourself, basically, and send us the bill. So I got this book that way. Got a stack of books. I haven't read most of them, unfortunately. If my parents are listening, I'm sorry. But this is one that, as we were discussing earlier, Robin, I sort of assumed that, sort of like the books of Jacob, about 1,000 pages, takes a huge chunk of decades, purports to tell you something kind of important about a place or a period of time. And I think the book buyer in his or her like mid-30s is thinking, be nice to have some kind of inspiration, some kind of meaningful reading experience. And we were going to talk a little bit more about historical fiction, I think, but this is that, I would say, a little bit more erudite than the average historical novel. You sort of think this is going to be a pretty serious book, like buying something like War and Peace. This is going to be an impactful read. So wasn't too hard to say this is going to be the book off the list that I choose this year. But
in your imagination, you're like, I'm going to be the world's expert on Georgia. This is going to be a rollicking read. Were you intimidated when it just landed? The Amazon package finally arrived and it was just that big?
Oh, absolutely. And then you just realize the practical challenge of reading this anywhere outside of the home. Are you going to
carrying it around?
Is this going to be a 8-pound addition to your bag?
You're an Amsterdam hipster. You're cycling around. We don't want you to be breaking your back with these kilos of books. I have that problem right now, which is that I'm reading a biography of Picasso, which is not fat, but it's tall and really dense with because they got the paintings, they got the room for the paintings.
Okay.
And I put that into my backpack alongside with my laptop, and I'm rucksacking. I'm rucking. Where you put like the weights into the backpack, and that's the way like middle-aged people can like build strength. I'm rucking all the time with this thing. So maybe you look at it as a rucking challenge.
That's a great idea. I think the book industry should do something with this. Like it's a bit of a marketing opportunity for them.
And then, here's another question for you. How many of these books have you actually read? What are your favorite books that you've actually read from this kind of genre of literary fiction, a big book? What you've got? What have been the big successes for you in that area?
I'm glancing. Well, we talked a little bit about my weakness. Well, the opposite of weakness for fiction in general. So that's already a small sample size for me, Robin. But give me a book about this size that's history, and I'll be happy to read it.
If this was not The Eighth Life and it was just called a non-fiction book about a single family's life through the purges of Stalinist Russia and Georgia, and it was by Princeton University Press, done by Professor Nino, you would just have dusted it off in 5 seconds. What's the difference? What is that? What's up with that?
It's a great point. It's a great point. I've read countless books like that. For example, so this is kind of 8 human stories, right, across the decades that happen to be from the same family. There's a beautiful book, nonfiction, by the New Yorker staff writer Joshua Yaffa, called Between Two Fires, which is basically just case studies, human stories from contemporary Russia. I couldn't have read that faster than I did. So it's just I need to just overcome this obsession with the idea that this is sort of true versus fiction.
It could be, Alex, and this is like a very depressing thought. It could be, and I'm trying to remember who wrote it. Someone noticed that men are not reading fiction anymore. and they only read nonfiction. And the
Wow.
basic argument by this writer was men just don't have imagination
Oh
and they
my
just
God.
don't have
What a
empathy.
thought. What
They're
a
just broke. It's just a broken gender.
mm.
Women can empathize. They want to sort of be inside people's heads. They want to see things through characters, whereas men just don't have the energy to invent people in their heads. They're just a broken gender.
Well, I agree with you that men are a broken gender. There's no doubt
Of
about
course.
that. But I do like to empathize. I do like to think about things from different perspectives, but just real
Right.
people versus concocted people.
Shall I give you the plot? Should we just run through this to give you a sense?
Yeah,
And
let's give everyone, including me.
listeners, we're gonna give some. I'm gonna avoid some sort of spoilers, but this is more just to give you a sense of the scope and how it works. So the opening and the bookend is we're gonna have Brilska is the niece who's gone rogue. Nitsa is the narrator, as I said. Brilska is her niece who is searching for family history. And she goes, okay, this all begins way back when with Stasia, short for Anastasia, who is in Tbilisi. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
So generation one begins with Anastasia. She's early 1900s. She's there before Soviet times, but there is a white guard who is going to become a red guard, I guess. So he's a Russian kind of colonialist. I'm guessing a czarist sort of Russian official. She is going to marry him and it's not going to be a great marriage. Spoiler alert. And her father gives her the chocolate recipe and goes,
You said from white guard to red guard. So probably at the time of the revolution, he's going to change sides. He's going to be with the Bolsheviks.
Yeah. And this book is full of foreboding. The dad gives her the chocolate, hot chocolate, and goes, anyone who drinks this is going to have bad things happen. It's incredibly addictive. So watch out for the curse of this delicious
Robin,
chocolate
sorry,
recipe.
what do you think about the introduction of that sort of magical realist element here? Do you think that that's a good idea for all the aspiring novelists out there, or do you think it sounds a little hokey?
Listen, I feel like magic realism, you read it one or two times and then you get tired of flying grandmothers pretty quickly. So my first magic realist book was Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. I read it at the age of 20 in college and I was like, you can't do better than this.
Yeah, it's pretty epic.
I mean, this is amazing. And then I read like Water for Chocolate, which has like a lot of the similar kind of, cooking things. And then if you're sad when you cook, then you cry, chilies or something like that. And I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. By the third time, I got to 100 Years of Solitude, I was like, no, could we just chill? Could something just behave normally? And I think one person just said, one person made another funny remark, which is, could you even do a magic realist novel in Britain? People just wouldn't stand for that. Like, it's only in jungles. It's always in exotic locations.
Yeah, I think with the cooking in particular, like there are certain cultures that have a real passion for food, and it's like not the Americans, and it's not the Brits.
Well, your family recipe for what? Eggos just has really changed everything right there. And your I don't know, what is the Alex Long recipe that Mrs. Long has taught you that is now going to be magic realism?
Egg in a window. You bite a little piece out of the bread and you put it in the skillet and you crack the egg right into the middle. I mean, it's
and that'll crack open your cold heart anytime you do that.
I'm writing a little bit these days, Robin. I'm gonna try to work that into my next
I guess in my case, it'd be my mother's spaghetti bolognese, which is like a very English variation on that. And maybe that would turn me somehow Italian or passionate or something like that. I don't know. It just doesn't work. So a lot of people did basically say this chocolate thing doesn't quite work. It seems like one step too many. And I think probably as a young writer, she was sort of in that 1980s Hollywood, let's snort cocaine and add everything in. And probably this is the one element where her editor probably could have just said, we've already got a lot in here.
Yeah.
But I think magic realism is also very good in the end. It is sort of like the modern genre where you spice up history novels. So, Gunter Grass kind of does it. It's just a handy kind of way to jazz up the history. I find it a little bit cheap myself. And it's the kind of thing where the moment you put it in a movie, it just looks stupid.
Oh, it would take a real talented cinematographer and CGI expert to make it work well.
So the chocolate's going to be there. It's a motif. A few people on Goodreads, a few people have said this is kind of a thing that crops up. A few people literally said it feels a bit weird where you're arguing for Georgians to take responsibility for their loss of memory, what happened in the Soviet Union. It seems a bit weird to have like a magical realist device where the bad things happen because you had chocolate, where really the bad things happened because awful people did awful things.
That's an interesting point.
And then we just speed through the rest. Stalin and Beria are figures in this, but a little bit like Midnight's Children, they're never named. So it's Kobo, and Beria's got
nickname? Kobo
right.
was a younger nickname.
And they name Beria and Stalin right at the very end, but it's a little bit like in Midnight's Children, where Indira Gandhi is never named. She's always called the widow, and it's revealed that it's actually Indira Gandhi. It's a similar kind of thing. But Stasia's gorgeous sister Christina is raped by Beria, and her husband Ramas then cuts her face so that no one will ever rape her again because she's so gorgeous that she will not be resisted. So that's the purges. That's the Great Terror coming in. Then Stasia's son, Constantine, goes to the siege of Leningrad. So we've got that covered. We've got that checked off. He's off there. He becomes a terrifying and rigid patriarch. That's going to make everyone miserable. He's going to have 2 kids who then take very different paths. Constantine. Kitty is Constantine, which is why I always hate these kind of multi-general books. I can never remember. This is my problem with multi-general things. I can never remember who's anyone's aunt is or who's anyone's uncle is. This is my problem with these kinds of novels. I cannot remember this. And that's why I can't read Marquez, because not only does he make people be grandparents, but he gives everyone the same name. So I cannot read 100 Years of Solitude.
I almost feel like that's tongue-in-cheek in his work.
Yeah. But no, I just can't take it because I'm being like, which Alex is this? Is this Uncle Alex or Cousin Alex?
Yeah.
And they're doing something really significant. So they'd be like, and then Alex came back to the vision after being away in the land, and the village had turned into skeletons while he was away. But then Uncle Alex spoke to Grandpa Alex, but they're not even doing that. I can't get it. So this is my problem. So then Stasia's daughter, she rebels against her father, becomes a singer-songwriter, and then flees to London. So you got the exile experience.
I definitely have. If you asked me to repeat that, I would absolutely nail it, Robin.
Then we get to the next generation. So then you get Daria and Nitsa. Daria is the narrator. She sees the fall of the USSR and the Georgian Civil War that follows, gets a heroin addiction, dies, maybe, with her husband. Yikes. So that's a bit of tragedy there.
They both had heroin addictions.
Apparently. And then Seventh Life, you get Nitsa. She is in the Tbilisi massacre, which was, I believe, a kind of Tiananmen Square event before the fall of the Soviet Union. And then you get Brilska, who's the Eighth Life. And after all this trauma, the 8th chapter is left completely blank. Blank pages.
Speaking of literary devices, that was a little rich for me.
I have to say that was a gigantic vomit emoji. That felt very freshman year of college. I am really going to show people this is going to be big. What if?
Postmodern, the chapter's empty. Yeah.
Yeah. It's got that same vibes of kind of like, what if in our theater, everyone's just wearing black? We don't even have costumes. In our play, everyone's just wearing black. So that's a speed through it. We've checked all the boxes. People say that it goes at a very rapid pace. It's 900 pages, and I have to say, just skimming the early chapters, she's not messing around. Things are coming in really, really quickly. She's not describing things very fast. She's rapidly going through these events. And some of the criticism was, hey, maybe it's a bit too quick. But I think for this kind of a historical
novel, want it to be pacey. Yeah.
You want it to be pacey. You want event after event after event. I probably haven't done it justice, but
I'm sure you have, Robin. I mean, I'm sure you did.
How did you feel about it? How are you feeling about it now? How are you feeling about it now as a historical work?
Well, again, kudos to the author for this accomplishment. I think it's fantastic. I think the reviewers loved it. The awards committees loved it. It did quite well. I would say, And I wanted to ask you earlier, Robin, if you thought it would make a good adaptation for the screen. But I am kind of surprised that I bought it in hindsight.
Huh.
It just seems like a little random in terms of
Huh.
the subject matter. I mean, Georgia absolutely pulls me in. Anything to do with the Caucasus. I was actually supposed to go this month on holiday, but it didn't work out. But I just feel like isn't that interesting? But I just feel like this one's a little off piece. The magical realism
You're
turns
just
me
not
off.
feeling it.
No,
Yeah, the
not.
magical. And let me ask you this:
Do you think it would make a good movie, or do you think it's tough to kind of do the eight stories, 3 generations thing on screen?
I get it. I think it'll be a really bad one. I think just because they're going to spend so much on sets and things like that, and it's all going to
Oh,
be
it's
in blue
gonna be
screen.
expensive. There's no doubt it'll be expensive.
I mean, so it'll be blue screen. It'll be way too epic, and there'll be way too many events. If it was kind of maybe smaller in scope, I can imagine the way it's written, it being like Downton Abbey. I think sort of people, I think it could be something like that.
Like you can hear the protesters outside the window, but you don't actually see the whole.
Yeah, exactly like that. They're having a family argument, and someone walks in and goes, "The Soviet Union has fallen."
Exactly.
End of season.
But yeah, to actually have
Comrade Stalin has died. Oh, just as we were about to get married.
Actually, you could probably do it for about $50,000 if you take that approach.
But it sounds like you would actually watch the show. What about you?
Oh,
Would you watch it?
I would love to watch it. Oh, here you go. 8-episode limited series. Each book is 1 episode. No expectation that there's going to be a season 2 because this is a closed story except for Brilke's unwritten.
Look,
chapter.
I mean, this is it. I think Netflix, just to name one streaming service, did a great job by doing that Ripley season, which was just a few episodes and then done. And I think just to do that would be great. And you could have different actors. It would be just different actors, different scenes, just 8 episodes, each one a book. And then the last episode would just be blankness.
Like white noise.
Just white noise for 52 minutes.
That
Credits.
The viewers would love that.
Well, it would be difficult. They'd have to do a health warning, just being like, wear a helmet because your mind is about to be blown.
You might lose your hearing after 42 minutes.
You might not even know what art is because we're about to push the limits. The CEO would have to answer questions in Congress about how he pushed art too far.
It could be a real violation of some sort of unknown FCC rules. Yeah.
There was a guy, an artist I really like, who was on Desert Island Discs, British radio show where you select the 5 songs you would take with you and they talk about your life. And this guy did it purely to mess with them, I'm sure, quite sure. And they said, okay, now what's your 5th song? And he goes, I want to do John Cage's 4 minutes and 11 seconds.
There you go.
Which, as we know, is 4 minutes and 11 seconds. And they're like, we do have a recording of this.
Do they do it?
But are actually, due to the BBC Charter, there's only so much of dead air time we're allowed to have.
But that makes sense, actually, because the average listener will think that their radio is broken after 30 seconds of quiet.
They won't appreciate that it's amazing. John Cage's amazing thing. And so you could do that. I think it would be a good TV show. But this also sort of brings up, let's just talk about historical fiction.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's not something that I like. I think I'm exactly on the opposite end of the spectrum of you. And I was thinking coming into this that there are a few things about historical fiction that are interesting. So I went through that Guardian list we went there, and there's a lot of historical fiction in there of a certain kind. So we got War and Peace, of course, and you got Beloved at number 2, which is absolutely historical fiction. One thing I noticed, though, is that there's 2 kinds of historical fiction. You've got literary historical fiction, which is going to be your Midnight's Children, your 100 Years of Solitude, and it's going to be about colonialism, trauma, genocide. And that is going to get you awards.
But would you also say there are going to be some serious efforts to develop characters in those books?
I think so. Of course, yeah. To be fair, that would be it, right? Like that would be the signal.
That's the distinction I think we might want to draw at some point too. Yeah,
that's a really good one. And yet, there's another kind of historical fiction that is immensely popular, which is just, hey, isn't history fun? Isn't this battle cool? Isn't it amazing to be around and imagine what it would be to be near Napoleon? Which I think is closer to what Tolstoy was doing with War and Peace and Spirit, which is, let's hang out in the past with these great figures. Let's imagine what it's like to be there. And then just to sort of drop one sort of little observation on you. For a personal project I was on, I came across the very first, top 100 list in Victorian times. And everyone was like, wow, this guy has just come up with a list that everyone should be reading. What a concept. And so they were debating it. Gladstone wrote in to sort of say, this is great. No, this should be on it. He did no on living. So that's one sort of issue. He sort of did this in the 1880s. There was an MP called Lubbock. One author appears twice for his poems and his novels. And it just goes novels, poems, as in like read all of it. And that's Walter Scott, who absolutely he does Ivanhoe, he does the Waverley novels, and it's absolutely the formula for what we want for historical fiction, which is you get people in the middle of history.
Yeah.
They have exciting kind of like normal people problems, but their normal people problems interact with great historical moments. And that's really exciting. And Walter Scott is nowhere, but without him, you don't get Alexandre Dumas, you don't get Victor Hugo, Les Miserables, and I'd argue you don't get Master and Commander, and I'd argue you don't get things like The Devil in the White City. But I think that tradition is absolutely alive and selling books, but it's just not getting awards. Where do you sit on this? I mean, that's the kind of book that I'm guessing you kind of like.
That's interesting. I feel like I, again, just reiterating my 9 out of 10 preference for nonfiction, but I did read Devil in the White City. I found it enthralling and fascinating. I mean, have you read it, Robin?
No. Tell me about it.
I mean, it's very creative. I give Eric Larson a ton of credit for this. He brings together two crazy events. One is the World's Fair in Chicago, 1890s, which is like the first electrified World's Fair. So you have people who are fascinated with, it being light in the evening. And then you have a serial killer who rents out a space near the World's Fair and basically...
And that really happened, right? That was a real thing.
Yeah, exactly. They're both historical events, and he clearly takes liberties with the details. But it's just the most, like, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's like one chapter World's Fair, one chapter serial killer, true crime type stuff, and it's just awesome. It is very enjoyable to read. It wouldn't be like a genre. This, you're just gonna find some tension here in my, like, or maybe some contradictions. Yeah. It wouldn't be something that I would say I'm gonna try and read a lot of that, just because I don't think it's like it's kind of pop history as opposed to, like, Zoroastrian traditions from 1650 to 1680 kind of thing. Like, I would like to read this could be a project for us, Robin, like an obscure piece of history turned into a bit of historical fiction, like really deep cut.
No, I like that idea. One book that sort of weirdly leapt to mind is that I quite like when people do weird episodes in authors' lives and turn them into sort of interesting novels. There was one very weird novel I read ages ago, which is based on the fact that Charles Dickens was in a horrific train crash that sort of derailed the end of his career, and that he, couldn't finish the novel Edwin Drood because he died before it could be completed. But it was his attempt to do a whodunit, which had been invented by Wilkie Collins that did Moonstone. But the twist is that Edwin Drood is a real figure who's addicting Dickens to opium, and actually the Moonstone novel actually contains some of the secrets to what's going on now, that kind of thing.
That's super cool.
I mean, and it's weird because it's not really, it feels very similar to what you had, which is sort of like, okay, it's more kind of almost like a Netflix pitch or something like that, where it's kind of like, hey, did you know that this really crazy thing happened?
Yeah.
You just want to live in that moment.
And it maybe it is just a little bit of condescension or something on my part, like, because Devil in the White City is absolutely brilliant. He's bringing together this extremely important historical event in the World's Fair, which I think also had the first like Ferris wheel.
I mean, and look at you, you're just rattling off all of these dad facts, right? Which is what you want from
Perfect,
historical fiction,
perfect dad facts. And the
right?
guy, yeah, like the guy had done the Eiffel Tower, and then he came and did the Ferris wheel, like all sorts of interesting stuff.
How are you on spy fiction?
Not as excited as you would expect, given
Yeah.
my interest in the space, But yeah, like I should be reading all the Le Carre stuff, but I just never have.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
that's because I'd rather have like a history, like institutional history of the CIA than a novel.
I guess where I'm netting out with you, and I think it's actually something that it took me a while to realize as well, is that quite often these award-winning historical novels are just going to be a little bit boring,
I think that's it. I think that's
there's no other way to put it. Whereas the genre historical fiction is going to be fun, but
Yep.
a genre. And so you don't get the benefits of having it on your shelf. You're reading a New York Times bestseller that everyone else has read, and you feel slightly dirty. But honestly, I feel like the middle ground is not serving intellectuals well. And
No.
you need to have like the equivalent of sword fights. You need to have the equivalent of villains. And not everything needs to be a reflection on national identity and race and
So
communism
heavy.
versus fascism.
I'm just gonna mention 3 titles that I had very different reactions to, and maybe there's a pattern, maybe there isn't. Wizard in the Kremlin. Have you read it or seen it on screen?
I mean, what is it?
Incredible. I mean, Robin, best novel I've read in a long time. It's actually by an Italian guy. It was recently turned into a movie that stars Jude Law. I don't get the sense that it did
Oh,
great.
well, he's Putin, right? And then
Wizard of the Kremlin. I was just looking for the author's name. I'll circle back on that. Giuliani de Empoli. I think he's like Swiss Italian. Just absolute page turner, but it's based on an actual recent historical figure,
yeah,
sort of the spin doctor in the Kremlin. Reads so well. Awesome book. Gentleman in Moscow. Everyone loved it. I hated it. I thought it was so
oh
dull.
no,
So
oh
dull.
no.
And then switching mediums, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, to your point on spy novels, one of my favorite movies of all time. I don't get the sense that I would have enjoyed reading it, but just like couldn't have enjoyed it more. So like all of us, Robin, we're nothing if not full of contradictions. But yeah,
I think you will. Let's just say this. In the end, I think intellectuals sometimes don't serve themselves well by taking out some of the fun, like tension, suspense, fighting, sex, jokes, and instead trying to be very serious, very big writers. And I don't actually think that this is the eighth life's issue, because from what I've read, she's working very hard just to speed you through as quickly as you can. But
absolutely.
just reading that summary depressed me. It just feels
Too
very
much.
weighty, very ponderous. Everyone is kind of like a symbol of a different part of history. And you can see the kind of post-it notes put up on the wall so that everyone is symbolizing something. Whereas like if you say, this is just this capsule moment where Putin totally just took over the whole country in like, it's these crucial 20 days. I'm in.
That's the
I'm
stuff.
in.
I think it requires a lot of bravery on the part of an author to say, I'm going to turn this little character, this little period of time into this incredibly gripping novel. I think that's really bold and demonstrates a lot of courage. But so does
Okay,
so
look,
does writing a sweeping, eight book
so
history.
let's just tie this up. This is a very high rated book, but according to our metric of like how many people actually finish it on Goodreads, roughly 90% of the people who've started it have finished it on Goodreads,
And that's
which is
pretty
actually well,
impressive.
but it's like 93, 94 for Virginia Woolf from last week. So
Okay.
she's not doing as well as Virginia Woolf, and her book is of course longer. So you've got to take that into account. We're
By about
comparing
800
900.
pages.
Yeah, so you can read those 4 books by Virginia Woolf and still not have read all of The Eighth Life, which is something to contemplate. So that's one thing to take into account, but it is the highest rated book we've done so far according to the mass population. And I think that's just because looking at the reviews, and everyone is sort of basically agreed. It's rollicking in the sense of family tragedy, fights, all this kind of stuff, which I'm guessing is not either something that you really want to read about either,
No,
which is sort of an
no,
issue.
no.
You're not looking for fights between daughters and marital spats. You're more interested in the logistics of how does someone own a room, how does someone turn the tables, and this actually gets me to one book that I could add to the list, but I have read two of the three of the Wolf Hall novels, and I think
Ah,
that is sort of like the ideal historical fiction
yeah,
of modern times,
yeah, I agree.
where she's really hitting all of the parts that you could want. She's such a talented writer, so she gets like the kind of Elizabethan language really well, which is really crucial, right? Because that stuff can be so grating in historical novels when you have someone. Elon Musk does it now when he did his trailer for the Odyssey. The way people talk in that Odyssey is so bizarre. The way people think people talk in epics.
Terrible.
So Wolf Hall was great. Bringing Up the Bodies has 99% finish rates.
Mm,
And that's the second one. And I swear that book is structured like The Godfather. It is just, someone in a very complex crime family that happens to be the royal family, and he's kind of painted himself into an awful corner. And the last 100 pages, he gets the fuck out of that corner. And you don't realize what cards he's played until they start paying off, and you just are thrilled and of course a bit horrified because his enemies are going to be done. Now that to me is exactly what I want. That to me is ideal because you got that genre juice to keep you going.
do you recommend Bringing Up the Bodies?
Yeah, I would recommend Wolf Hall and Bring Up the Bodies, but we can also cover the third one. Maybe if you abandon Wolf Hall, we can do a double bill.
Okay, okay. I think we should put that on the list. That's a good cliffhanger
Excellent.
for a future episode for the listeners.
Alex, are you even going to begin this book? I'm not even going
No,
to say finish it.
no.
No.
I'm gonna
So what does
read a
that
little
mean?
bit more. I'm gonna
What?
read a little bit more about it. Yeah, it's too
And I
big.
think this is gonna answer the performative reading question. I know you're reading this on the plane to Georgia, to
I'm reading
Tbilisi.
this on the plane to Georgia, or I'm gonna find a beautiful cafe or hotel lobby in Tbilisi and just sit there and see what comes my way. I feel like there were some interesting conversations would ensue if one were to sit in a Georgia-oriented space with that book.
Also, it's a bestseller in Germany, much bigger seller in Germany and the Netherlands. So if you were to read it in a cafe in Germany, who knows who you might encounter? You might find an interesting person there. But I agree, this is an in situ book. Like I never resented people in Singapore who were reading Crazy Rich Asians in Singapore.
Yeah, exactly. I think, time and a place. I feel like, you could also read it in the Den of Spies that is Vienna. I think that might be a nice place to read it. And it's
Uh,
also kind of late 19th century joint anyway. That
that is a great one. Yeah. And then someone would come up to you and say something like, "The fog is low in Tbilisi this evening." And
exactly.
then you just go for it and you just go, "But the ducks are happy." And then hopefully it's all working out.
Hopefully you said the right thing or at least not the wrong thing.
Exactly. Why are you putting it on your shelf? I mean, listen, I think we have to talk about this, Alex. I'm feeling a lot of negative energy around this book. I'm feeling like it's a bit of dead weight that has become. Normally, we're talking about how joyful this book is, but this is getting to be one of our more depressing episodes. This feels like an albatross.
Again, we commend the author for her accomplishments, but I'm not going to read it. It's going right back where it was, which is in my nascent Caucasus zone, right beside "Let Our Fame Be Great," which is by our friend Oliver Bullough, which is another book we could have chosen. "Journeys Among the Defiant People of the Caucasus" is the subtitle, and it's just, it's the title is beautiful, but the book doesn't necessarily need to be read.
And what a title! What a title! Most people would agree with you that is a title to sell.
Purchase
That
bait,
is marketed.
purchase bait.
Uh,
So that's in the
and
Caucasus section, yeah, for sure.
okay, so and By the way, what is our policy? Do you ever give books to secondhand stores when you move, that kind of thing?
So far, I haven't. I of all the things that I pack up when I move, books are about 40 to 50% of my possessions. So I
This is
keep
going with you.
bringing them along. Yeah, but this one might be donated. This one might be donated.
What a generous donation.
Yeah,
Here you go. Here you go, orphans.
yeah. I think maybe this won't go to the Amsterdam Public Library. Yeah.
And any books completed or books bought since we last spoke?
I did finish A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen Peck, which was fantastic. It's only about 100 pages, and you could read it in an evening. It's awesome. Very thought provoking, very funny. It kind of reads like a script. So I recommend that one to everyone here. How about you? What do you got?
Super. I'm plugging. I got having watched the movie and been just a total fan of the movie and loving the debate with Emily Woolston, the translator of the Odyssey, now saying that Christopher Nolan's an idiot and this book is so trashy. The movie is so trashy. I decided it was time to read the Odyssey. Studied it ancient Greek for GCSE way back when, and then realized while I was watching the movie that I'd forgotten all of it. And also the parts that I'd really studied was a totally useless episode that is so minor and totally unfilmable. So I was like, where's Nausicaa in this? Why isn't he hiding in the bushes? So I was like, it's time for me to actually read it. So I feel like I'm reading it for the first time. It's really good.
You should
Reading it on the Kindle.
definitely listen to Ezra Klein's 15-minute monologue on the meaning of the Odyssey.
Tell me. I feel like I don't need to. I want to hear your 15-minute monologue on his 15-minute monologue. Tell me about it, Alex.
I thought it was going to be kind of an interview of someone who was expert on the Odyssey, so I listened to it, and then I couldn't stop listening because it was just basically him speaking about or sort of wondering whether Odysseus is kind of the villain or the hero, and it all seemed kind of too tied to contemporary politics for my taste. Of many people, one of many people who is backward applying anachronisms into something 2,500 years ago.
I feel like I listen to movie podcasts. It's my big heroin addiction. I can't get enough of them, and it's amazing how many people are suddenly Odyssey experts.
Yeah,
everyone is sort of like, well, actually, in the poems, these people spend all of their lives watching movies from Italy, involving people's heads being blown off, and all of a sudden, it's just not credible that they spent that much time really caring about Homer's original portrayal of the thing. But credit to Christopher Nolan. I think one of the things he does really well as a filmmaker is that he makes movies that are very easy to discuss. It's an absolute economist effect where they make you feel smart because he lays his cards and his thesis so obviously on the table that you can disagree with it almost too easily.
Yeah.
And so it's perfect for debate. He doesn't hide any of his tricks. His script is normally points to exactly this is the message of the movie, which just makes it very easy for people to then disagree with it in a way that leads to very compelling conversations. So yeah, I feel like Ezra Klein just fell for that bait 100%.
I'll send you the link. We can put it in the show notes, as they say.
We'll put it in the show notes. What are we reading next, Alex? It's my turn.
So, Robin, I don't know how you're going to feel about this, but I thought we might want to switch back since it's up to me to kind of do the research and the interviewing next time. Switch back to nonfiction.
Great.
With a book that you've been looking at for a very long time, American Lion, biography of Andrew Jackson.
No, that's good. That's going to be good. You know why I read that?
No, did you read it?
I've read half of it and then abandoned it.
That's pretty good though. That's pretty high ratio.
I read it almost on Trump's recommendation.
Oh God, maybe we should reconsider.
Because on the first term, everyone was like, "This is like Andrew Jackson," and Trump himself was sort of like, "Yeah, Andrew Jackson. I hear he was a really good man who did really good stuff, and people treated him very unfairly." And just as an English person, I was like, never heard of him. Well, the only thing I knew was his great line of "One man with courage creates a majority," which is a great line about politics. Knew nothing else about him. So I was like, I better figure out who this person is if I'm to be in America where everyone's suddenly talking about Andrew Jackson.
That's context I didn't know. That's awesome. So that sets the stage pretty well, I think.
Great hair. He is the guy on the $20 bill, right? He's that hair is astonishing.
Yeah.
For a man who's not born in our times. How he maintained it, I do not know. And I speak as a man with not much of his own.
I imagine
used
it was
the hair he had to the max.
Whale blubber and other products that are no longer available.
Smelled delightful. Alex, thank you so much for sharing this book. Nino, we just want you to know we really salute your accomplishments.
Incredible accomplishment. No question about
it. You did much better. You did a much better book about Georgia than we ever could. And we don't want to pretend otherwise.
Hands down.
Thanks, Alex. Look forward to talking to you next time.